Welcome to Dark News.
Dark News.
Dark News.
Oh, shit.
They'll never know what it means to have a private moment to themselves.
BBC posted their first article about Silk Road and Tor. Oh, I don't have to go to the street corner and get shot?
I think Bitcoin means 1,000 Silk Roads.
This is a show about cryptocurrencies,
anonymity,
and uncensorship.
All right, and we are live. Welcome to all of you internet citizens. I am the host of Dark News, Kristov Atlas, and today I'll be talking about the dark markets like we do every week. I'll be covering a story related to BTC China, and I'll also be answering your live questions on the air. If you would like to submit your live questions, you can tweet hashtag Dark News, or you can send a tweet to Dark News Show at Dark News Show on Twitter. Or you can join the Google Plus Hangout Live Q&A app by clicking on the left side bottom of the screen if you're viewing on YouTube. So first, let's before we jump into the markets, I just want to mention, if you would like to support the show, if you're enjoying the show, please consider tipping or subscribing. You can do that when I put up this video. Later on, I'll put a link to Bitcoin address, Dogecoin address, and also a new Patreon account where you can subscribe on a monthly basis to help support the show, help give me some more time to work on the content, purchase equipment, and so forth, and improve the content and the aesthetic quality of the show. So first, let's jump into the dark markets. So these are the markets for April 22nd, 2014. So about a 1% increase for the dollar relative to silver. Silver went down a little bit since last week. You can now purchase 1.6 grams of silver with every US dollar. Gold also just up. You can buy about 1% more gold than you could last week with the dollar. Slight increase for Bitcoin relative for the dollar relative to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin dropped about 5% relative to the dollar. You can now purchase 2.03 millibits with every US dollar. And that's after last week there was a considerable rebound in the Bitcoin market. That was after the Central Bank of China announced that they would not at any point in the future plan to permanently ban Bitcoin, but they would impose some restrictions on whether you can convert the local currency there into Bitcoin on exchanges. So that was generally good news for Bitcoin investors in China, and we saw a considerable up spike since then. Down slightly, just about 5% over the course of the last week or so, the last 4 days, but generally up for Bitcoin. Darkcoin actually shot up a bunch, and the dollar lost 5% or almost 6% relative to Darkcoin. Darkcoin has also regained some of its market cap and its ranking in the cryptocurrencies. It was at 21st last week, and it's up to 17th today, so that's an overall improvement since last week. Meanwhile, Fedora coin, it's worth about the same amount as it was last week relative to the dollar, but it has fallen from 55th place to 61st in the market cap rankings for cryptocurrencies. Now, keep in mind, this does include some cryptocurrencies that are a bit unusual in that they cannot be mined and so forth. I may be changing the ranking system, tweaking it a little bit in the future to exclude cryptocurrencies such as some of the coins that have already been mined out or that are completely remined. Not any major changes in terms of the price for ammo. 22 LR rounds, same as where they were at last week. You can purchase 8.33 of those rounds for every US dollar and 4.55 9mm rounds for each US dollar. So overall, the GSBD market cap, that's gold, silver, Bitcoin, and Darkcoin, today is at $226.77 trillion. That's down just a bit from last week at $230 trillion, just about a 1% decline. So again, at this point, that index is primarily being dominated by the gold and silver, which haven't changed too much in the last few weeks. Just a slight decline overall. And let's move on to our news story. This is about BTC China. So this story comes from a number of different websites, including, I believe this particular screenshot is from Gawker. So BTC China, one of the world's largest Bitcoin exchanges by trading volume, released a new mobile-friendly web app called the Picasso ATM today. So this web app is supposed to allow users around the world to exchange the digital currency for cash without having to find a physical ATM. So the website continues, in order to use Picasso ATM, Bitcoin owners must first load the currency into their Picasso wallet. That's kind of associated with their BTC China account, and then you sell it through the web app, and buyers can then immediately confirm transactions on their smartphones. So it's targeted at casual business Bitcoin users, as well as business and store owners who can set their own profit margins trading the currency, similar to the way that you would have for an ATM machine. Now, since it's a web app and it doesn't need to be downloaded as an app onto a smartphone, BTC China says that this design should be able to avoid some of the third-party app store regulation or censorship that goes on. This is definitely a point of heartache with blockchain.info and other Bitcoin wallets that had apps for the iPhone store that were taken down. So I did take a little look at this app for BTC China, and I tried to create a BTC China account, which I did successfully, but I couldn't actually get into the Picasso application. It may be that it's not intended for use in the United States quite yet. They were inviting me to send my Bitcoins to them, but they weren't showing some of the other features of Picasso. But here's a little screenshot from BTC China. And you can see you can use it to buy Bitcoin, sell Bitcoins, you can fund your account, and so forth. Now, I think this soft ATM idea is very compelling. The problem with the physical ATMs is that they're kind of at the mercy of the regulators there in that area. It's very difficult to try and set up a physical ATM if you're not going to be working with a banking partner. And of course you do, if you're going to, even if it's just going to be a one-way vending machine type of ATM where people deposit cash and they get out Bitcoin, you still need to show up and take the cash out and so forth. So to attempt to run it in an unregulated fashion is going to be quite risky for the ATM owners. So they do necessarily need the blessing of the regulators in their particular area. Unless they're going to, tow it on the back of their car and go on some kind of crazy, mobile ATM chase. And, the problem that has been with these so-called hard ATM machines is that the regulators require very stringent requirements identifying customers, or these very high bonds that they need to have in reserve in order to be a licensed money transmitter. In the particular city that I live in, I believe the bond is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars at a minimum. So it can be quite difficult to pass muster for these regulations and deploy one of the hard ATMs. Now, so a soft ATM would be a potential solution in this instance. In some areas, there may be regulations where you can get away without being a money transmitter as long as you're dealing in quantities under a certain amount. So that could be, a few $100s, it could be $1,000, it could be a couple $1,000s, whatever. And in those kind of situations, could be quite appealing to have these kind of soft ATMs. I think we could see them as mobile apps in some app marketplaces. Web apps are okay as well. They can be a bit clunky to log into a web application through your browser on your smartphone. I certainly find it to be fairly clunky, but it's certainly usable. And if people have a significant financial incentive, as they will for cryptocurrencies in the future, then maybe they will put up with using these kind of web applications. There's also the possibility of having these HTML5 based applications that kind of look and feel similar to an app on your phone, but they're actually just a link to a website that appears as one of these little app tiles on your phone. So I think that's a very interesting approach to helping people transact between fiat currencies and cryptocurrencies in the future. And I'm looking forward to seeing more designs and more implementations of these soft ATMs. And I just wanted to mention with regards to the market, so I'm following 3 cryptocurrencies right now. I'm following Bitcoin, Darkcoin, and Fedora Coin. And they're all 3 of them are at different ballparks in terms of market cap. Bitcoin right now is at a $6.2 billion market cap. Darkcoin is at a $2.7 million market cap, and Fedora Coin is all the way down at $259,000. So they're in 3 different leagues. I'm definitely looking to find more cryptocurrencies to follow. These 3, Bitcoin is the leader, and Fedora Coin and Darkcoin are both privacy-centric cryptocurrencies, which is why I'm interested in following them. But if you know of any other cryptocurrencies that you think I should follow, please do let me know. And I'm always looking for other stats and market metrics to continue to follow for the dark markets over time. So let's jump into some Q&A for the day. Once again, if you have a question, there's still time for you to get your questions in. You can log into the Google Plus Hangout and use the Q&A app to post your questions there. You can also post your questions on Twitter by tweeting at Dark News Show or hashtag Dark News. And I will do my best to answer your questions. If you have questions during the week in between episodes, or if you're watching the recorded version of this episode, feel free to hit me up with your questions on Twitter. That's at Dark News Show. All right, let's answer a live question. So this is coming from one of our live viewers. He says, "What are your thoughts on Andreas's upcoming appearance on Joe Rogan, which will be happening, I believe, within a few minutes or hours today? What would I like him to discuss? And if Joe invested and lost money, what should Andreas say?" So I'd like to hear some more about what's coming down the road for Bitcoin. I think Andreas did a wonderful job of covering sort of the state of Bitcoin a month or 2 ago when he was on the Rogan show. And I'd love to see some more about what's coming down the road. I'd like to have Andreas talk about how the market has responded to Mt. Gox collapsing and some of the hacks that have happened on other above ground exchanges or dark market exchanges, and some of the technological innovations that have already happened or that are coming in the near future in that realm. I think that's quite important. And I think it's important because it's an example of a relatively free market response as opposed to some type of top-down regulation. It's not even regulation that's coming from something like the Bitcoin Foundation or one of these more monolithic organizations that try to be leaders or have some degree of control over the Bitcoin marketplace. This is really a bottom-up kind of solution to these challenges. So I'd love to hear Andreas talk some more about that. And if Joe, bought some Bitcoins when it was a bit higher and it's gone down since then, I would say, Joe, just hold on for the ride. If you're buying Bitcoins to speculate on the price, then I would recommend holding on to them for at least a year. You're going to get better capital gains taxes in most places in the world by holding on to it long term, and the overall long term trend is very, very, very clear. People, I believe I said the other day that someone looked at if you had bought Bitcoins and held on to them for a year at any given point in time, even in the kind of the worst case scenarios, you still haven't lost money for holding and selling after exactly a year. And that's pretty powerful. You certainly can't say that for gold and silver over the last few years. And even, a while ago, you couldn't really say that for gold and silver because it was a bit more up and down. Yeah, that would be my recommendation, is if you're in it for the speculation, just hold on to the money. And if you're not, then don't worry about it. The price will rise and fall, and you'll continue to be able to use it as a medium of exchange. What are my thoughts on dark market? So dark market, I'm planning on doing another episode about this a bit more in depth during the week. But dark market was this hackathon project that was being worked on by Amir Taki and some other coders. Some of them were associated with the Airbits company, Airbits. And so what they were doing is they had 36 hours approximately to come up with a Bitcoin or cryptocurrency related project. And they created this distributed exchange where you could buy and sell goods, and it would use the Bitcoin blockchain to store information about sellers, to store their reputations, and to actually store their listings for selling products. And so it's a censorship resistant way of exchanging goods and potentially services by using blockchain technology. And this has been kind of a weak point for some of the other dark markets out there, in that they have a centralized existence. They have a single web server that's sitting somewhere. A lot of them operate as hidden Tor services, and that gives them some censorship resistance in that it's difficult to track them down and find out exactly where they are. But once you do, you can take the website down relatively quickly, and then it needs to spawn off into something else. As there was the segue from the Silk Road into Silk Road 2.0, it wasn't exact. I don't believe it was an exact copy of it. It was just sort of a similar website using the same brand name. So I'll be covering that in some more depth during the week, but I think it's a very interesting project, very encouraging. It's not something that you can launch right now. You can't spawn up your own instance of dark market and use it with a high degree of security, because it's just a little project that someone whipped up as a proof of concept in 24 to 36 hours. But obviously it could be extended and built upon to become a serious piece of software. So I think it's very, very cool. Here's an interesting question from another live viewer. What are your thoughts on the proposed Unicode symbol for Bitcoin? Are you voting for it or against it? So Unicode is the standard for the characters that make up the text on our computer. And there are all of these different symbols. They're numbered, and that's so that programs and people can kind of easily look up the codes and encode them into binary data and so forth. So some of the some of the characters that are lower in this Unicode alphabet are in the ASCII range. ASCII is ASCII. And that would include letters and numbers and basic punctuation symbols and new line characters and stuff like that. And as you start climbing up into the up higher into the Unicode spectrum, there are more and more esoteric symbols, different currency symbols, smiley faces, boxes, all kinds of stuff. And so the issue with Bitcoin is that we have kind of an official symbol for Bitcoin, but it's not in this Unicode set. It looks like a B, and it's got 2 slashes through it, much like the official, sign for $1. Now, on my computer, and I think this is pretty standard, the dollar symbol has just 1 slash through it. And there is another currency, which is the Thai baht, BAHT, which looks like a B with a single slash through it. And I've sometimes used that to represent Bitcoin. A lot of people use either that symbol or similar symbols. There's another one that has like a single little horizontal dash through it, which looks pretty good too, but it's not exactly the official Bitcoin symbol. And so there's been some talk of, well, Bitcoin's a pretty large currency at this point. It's being used all over the world. Maybe it's time that we actually add this officially into the Unicode set so that it can be standardized for all of the different computers that are out there on the internet. So I think that's a perfectly good idea. I think it's fine to add another Unicode symbol as long as we can get it implemented in operating systems in a quick and easy fashion. If we have to wait for the next generation of operating systems, we may not want to wait for that. It might be a while before the next version of Windows comes out, or even the next service pack for Windows or something like that. And if people have to start downloading special language support packs or whatever in order to get this added to their operating system, it's not necessarily the way to go, because most people are not going to put in that effort. So in that case, we'll have to use one of the existing characters that looks similar to the Bitcoin one. I think the Thai bot one is okay, but obviously if you are using it in some context where you might have both the Thai bot and Bitcoin currency, that's going to be very confusing. Obviously that would be the case in Thailand. And there's another symbol that's that I mentioned before that's like a B. It's got a little horizontal dash through like the bottom half of the B, and I think it looks pretty good. And so I'm also a fan of using that as a stopgap measure for now until we can get the Bitcoin symbol officially included as a Unicode symbol. And obviously I think it should be something that people can easily type into their computers too. You shouldn't have to look it up in some obscure place and type it in. It should be almost as easy to type in as something like the $ or the euro sign on European keyboards or whatever it is, wherever you live. There should be a pretty easy combination of keys to hit to bring up the Bitcoin symbol, because I think it's going to be pretty big. So those are my thoughts on the symbol. There's also been some talk on the Bitcoin developers mailing list about whether they want to rebrand the unit of currency to something like bits, like send me 5.4 bits or something along those lines. I think it's an interesting discussion. It's always tough to decide, well, do you want to use bits or millibits or microbits or satoshis or something along those lines. Actually, I was a fan of, a while ago, just abbreviating satoshis. A satoshi is like the smallest unit of Bitcoin right now. It's 0.70 is followed by a 1, so it's the 8th decimal point after it's the 8th decimal place after the decimal point. And so calling those satoshis, and if you have very large numbers of satoshis, as you would for most transactions right now with where the value of Bitcoin is at, you could call them like kilosatoshis or kilotoshis or something along those lines. The nice thing about that would be that it would be a real long time, maybe never, that we would need to go lower than that unit. But I don't have any particular opinions about what the best way is to represent the unit of currency for Bitcoin. I think the market will decide that, and we don't need any one person to come up with the official way to refer to Bitcoin units of currency. Here's another question from a live viewer. When I tried to download the Bitcoin clients, the standard Bitcoin client on Tails Linux, I get an error. What did I do wrong? So probably you did nothing wrong. There was an issue with Bitcoin Core, which is the official standard Bitcoin client, formerly known as Bitcoin Qt. The client, formerly known as Bitcoin Qt. And with version 0.9 and their security fix 0.9.1, they were both incompatible with Tails Linux. They updated some kind of core library that was no longer... it was a dependency that was no longer in the latest version of Tails, and so it simply wouldn't work. So if you do want to use Bitcoin Core with Tails Linux, and I think that's a good idea, you can use Bitcoin Qt 0.8.6. It is on the bitcoin.org website. And you just have to kind of look around the directories for the downloads to find it, but it is there. And you can use that for Tails. And, it is missing a couple features in terms of, more sophisticated survivability in terms of transaction malleability. It doesn't have those cheaper fees that were reduced in 0.9, but it is not vulnerable to the heartbleed bug, fortunately. If you actually bring up the little about section of the client, you'll see that it doesn't have the version of OpenSSL that is vulnerable to the heartbleed bug, so that is very good news. And they are working to, I've been in touch with the Bitcoin developers. They have been aware of this for a little while now, and they are working to resolve it. So hopefully in the next version of Bitcoin, the Bitcoin client, they will have fixed this, and you will be able to use it for Tails Linux. There's also a Bitcoin developer that's putting out nightly builds of the Bitcoin core. So it may be that they may already have a version of it that you can download that works with Tails. I haven't actually tried it out yet, but that is a possibility. So someone on Twitter asked about Blackcoin. I don't have too many thoughts about Blackcoin. It's not privacy oriented, so I haven't really been taking a quick, very close look at it. I know that it's sort of it's playing with this idea of having both a proof of work and a proof of stake, and I believe it, it sort of segues over to proof of stake after a while, after it's burned out in the proof of work area, or maybe it does both at the same time after a while. I think that's really cool to experiment with that stuff. I wonder if you actually would be able to experiment with that stuff if it was a sidechain. I'm not exactly positive on that, but that is one of the concerns that I have about sidechains is if we completely stopped using altcoins and only had sidechains, would we be able to do all this cool experimentation? I'm not exactly sure. I don't really see anything in Blackcoin as being sufficiently different from Bitcoin that it could ever become the next Bitcoin, but it's a very interesting form of experimentation, and I'm sure you can make money speculating on it or mining at the right time and so forth. I would just be very careful about playing the speculator with those type of coins, because it's hard to see what they have going for them in the long run in terms of fundamentals. But I hope Blackcoin will prove me wrong, and they will be the next big thing and improve on what we've already got. Here's another live question about one of the other questions that I answered. So this viewer wants to know, why have so many Bitcoin and altcoin clients, the developers of those clients, been so slow to support Tails Linux? So there's no really short and easy answer to that, but it is certainly true that Tails Linux is a fantastic way for people to easily and securely connect to the Tor network. I think it's an amazing resource. Last week I was talking about how there were a number of journalists involved with Edward Snowden and the NSA whistleblowing that used Tails as an operating system to apparently privately and securely communicate with Edward Snowden and with each other. So it's an invaluable resource, and I absolutely do think that cryptocurrency client developers should attempt to make their software compatible with this very important operating system. It really is an improvement on just using Tor browser for your regular operating system. Now, that being said, there are lots of tricky things with making software compatible, and Tails, they haven't necessarily made it easier on the developers to make this compatibility happen. For security reasons, the Tails developers stripped out a lot of the stuff that you usually find in Linux. A lot of these tools that help you download software, build them properly for your platform, and then execute them. A lot of that was stripped out from Tails. So in order to make your software compatible, you have to be able to provide a binary that can be executed on Tails. It may have to be kind of tailored for Tails to a significant degree. It's still based on this kind of old version of Debian Linux, and it's not even on the latest version. It's 2 versions below the current beta version of Debian Linux. So a lot of the important dependencies that people usually find in modern versions of Linux are missing from the Tails operating system. I'm hoping that in the not too distant future that Tails developers will be getting it up to the latest version of Debian. I don't think that will be happening for Tails 1.0, which will be coming out sometime in the near future, the very near future. In fact, they already have my friend on Facebook, Tom Foolery, let me know that the release candidate number 1 for Tails 1.0 has already been released as of yesterday or today. So I don't think that they will fix that for the 1.0 version of Tails, but I know it's something that's on their radar. And I've also been pushing, along with other people, these cryptocurrency client developers to get their stuff compatible with Tails and make sure that they have that support, because it's a very important part of financial privacy to be able to use your cryptocurrency through these kind of privacy networks. So I think it's well worth the effort if they can make it happen. So a live viewer asks, what is Bitcoin blockchain bootstrapping? I can't remember if I've answered this on a previous episode, but so the Bitcoin blockchain is this big ass file. It's a ledger of all of the Bitcoin transactions that have ever taken since it was officially launched in 2009, I guess. And it's gigabytes in size. It's somewhere between 14 and 20 gigabytes at this point. And so there are kind of 2 kinds of clients that you could use for Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. One is like an SPV client. SPV stands for something I forget, but basically the idea is that it doesn't have to download the entire blockchain in order to participate in the Bitcoin network. It will actually they'll store the blockchain on some centralized server, which does need to keep a copy of it, but then it will get kind of information from that centralized server. So that's a bit dangerous in that you have to trust the authenticity and the uptime of that centralized server in order to use that SPV client. The alternative is to use something like the Bitcoin Core client, which does require you to download the entire blockchain. And that can take a long time. The way that it works is you connect to 1 or more Bitcoin nodes and you download the blockchain from them. And if you unfortunately get stuck with a node that's kind of slow, then it will take you a really long time to get the blockchain. Even worse if you're connecting through a privacy network like Tor, which introduces reduced bandwidth and some degree of latency into the process as well on top of that. So it can take quite a long time to do that. So the idea of bootstrapping it is that you can download, they can sort of checkpoint the blockchain, take a big chunk of it, put it up for you to upload online through a website, and then you can download it through whatever means that you usually do. You can download it through a BitTorrent, all these different ways of getting it much, much faster. And there's actually a new Bitcoin developer on the scene who is working on trying to allow these clients to download the entire blockchain, but do it in a fashion that's more like BitTorrent. He actually aspires that it would be even faster than downloading it through BitTorrent. So that's really, really cool. I think that will help quite a bit in terms of making these full clients, as opposed to the thin SPV clients, more usable. And if you wanted to download the blockchain through this bootstrapping method, what you can do is just do a Google search for Bitcoin bootstrap.dat. DAT. Here's another question from a listener. Do you agree that Bitcoin would be perfect for Russia, Iran, etc. due to the ban of Visa and MasterCard as a consequence of the illegal sanctions over the Ukraine situation? Absolutely, yeah. The ban of Visa and MasterCard are essentially a dictum of the United States government. It's capital controls, it's economic embargo. And Bitcoin was designed to surpass these kinds of restrictions. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a way of circumventing financial censorship. And it's censorship resistant, it's distributed, and it's peer-to-peer. So absolutely Bitcoin would be a way for people to purchase goods and services, to exchange value online without the use of things like Visa and MasterCard and PayPal and these other tightly controlled means of transferring value, tightly controlled by the state. So absolutely it would be perfect for Russia and Iran, and mainly for the people. I mean, if Putin can't use Visa or MasterCard, I don't really care. If Iran has trouble, if the Iranian government has trouble, I don't really care. But, in a place like Iran, I think that some of the heaviest censorship is not coming from the United States, but from the Iranian government itself, whereas in Russia, their current troubles seem to be more of a consequence of a foreign government as opposed to their own government. So slight difference there, but yeah, Bitcoin is for the people, and it's a way of getting around these kind of restrictions. So I completely agree with that question. And let's do one more quick question. So this viewer asked, was DPR, Dread Pirate Roberts, busted by hacking Tor? So the Dread Pirate Roberts was the site admin for the Silk Road that was shut down by the FBI in possible concert with other government agencies. And allegedly, this has been associated, this name has been associated with Ross Ulbricht, who is in prison right now, facing a trial from the government for various crimes related to the Silk Road. And so the answer is that we don't know if he was busted. If it is actually him, let's assume for the moment it is. We don't really know. We'll see how the trial goes, but we don't really know if it involved hacking Tor. Hacking Tor is difficult. We certainly saw that in the leaks that were released from the NSA. They expressed some frustration and some difficulty in hacking Tor. And so if you're going to go after someone like the Dread Pirate Roberts, it's not an obvious avenue for attacking him. There's lots of other ways that you would probably try first and get more success with it. Now, the FBI does have a story about how they pinpointed him that was disclosed in their indictment. And this was around DPR posting about his idea for the Silk Road and so forth on some accounts that were not anonymous. They were tied to his personal identity. And so basically the story is that he exercised poor operational security when he was first getting Silk Road going. This was permanently archived on the web, and the FBI agents were able to look back at this record and figure out the connection between his personal identity and his online identity. So that's the story. Now, we also know that law enforcement agencies have long been practicing this methodology called parallel construction, where they use some means to actually find a person that they want to indict, whether it is legal or extra legal. This could be maybe based on traffic that was captured by the NSA in their mass dragnet surveillance, or it could be some other means. And that's how they actually find the person. And then they go back and they retroactively come up with a story about how they supposedly found the person, which is false. But once you know who the person is that you're trying to target, it's much, much easier to go back and try to find facts that would support the idea that you found him through him or her through other means. And so that's why it's called parallel construction, because it's a parallel construction of another timeline of law enforcement finding its individuals parallel to what actually happened in terms of what was actually going on. And part of parallel construction is that you don't disclose the actual methodology used for finding that person. Once you have a reasonable story that looks good on paper, that's generally going to be good enough for the courts, and you won't have to give up your real sources. So we may never know exactly what level of hacking Tor was involved with the Silk Road, but it's not an obvious way of achieving that end. So I do believe that will be it for today. Thank you so much for watching Dark News. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any feedback about the show, please leave a comment in the video or hit me up on Twitter or Facebook or wherever else. And I've already been getting feedback about the show, people giving me positive feedback, people giving me some encouragement to improve on the aesthetics of the show and all that stuff, and that's all stuff that I'm working on. To whatever degree you can financially support the show, that will absolutely help me make improvements to the show, so please do consider that. And I will see you next week. Thanks so much for watching.